Welcome to my dungeon grow room. I'm going to go over some of the things that I've already planted and where they are in their different stages and just some of the, supplies that I experiment with. Okay, so here's what we have so far. And I say experiment with because that's a lot of what I do when I garden is I experiment. Okay, so I have a substantial wall set up for many different things. A lot of the stuff that is planted down here came in spurts, specifically. These two trays here were planted at the beginning of February. And I finally have a cucumber sprout coming up. So, eggplant right there. Now, aside from those two, the things that I planted in these areas, which are all cucumbers and eggplant, I believe, those are the only two sprouts that have popped up so far. I'm not really sure why that is, but I was thinking maybe it had something to do with how cool it is in my basement. So, I don't have a heating mat. Instead, I put an actual heater down here. Now what you'll notice too is in this computer desk, I also have more seed starts here. Most of these are peppers. This is actually rosemary, which tends to like warm weather, and they also like to be covered. Those all were just planted within this last week. So we'll leave those under there with the heat source close to them, and hopefully we will have some sprouts here soon. Okay, so a couple things that are doing pretty well that need transplanted that I have not transplanted yet. This would be the bronze fennel. Now if you're noting, oh, and this is dill back here. So those definitely need transplanted into their own homes. Now, if you've noticed, there's a lot going on. As I said before, I like to experiment. So one thing that I've found in the house is using tape and writing on it with pen or marker seems to work well. If you see here, I tried popsicle sticks and faded, also molded. So I will not be using popsicle sticks again. I also use these type of tags with markers. These are very similar to like yogurt, cottage cheese, sour cream containers. And between moisture and the light, you see they are actually not holding the names anymore. This one we can still read, thankfully. I also tried the knife trick, and as you can see there too, between the light and the moisture, it's falling off. Here is one that held up well so far. However, it is moldy. So, experiments all around. My go-to for in the house stuff, again, tape and marker. Now, there are times where I will actually just write the marker on the container. I've been playing around with peat moss this year. It's not something I've ever used before. I'm not sure that I will continue to use it. I just bought a few of them to try them out, but I'm not really sure I'm going to continue. Another new thing for me this year are these little pods. So I bought several of them. And I am not a big fan of the smaller pods. If you see right here, this one actually has some mold on it. It's not super. Even if you let them soak the required amount of time, to me, they seem to dry out. Now, I also have some of the bigger ones, clearly still a little prone to mold, but I also think that could be partially my basement. Holds a lot of moisture down here. Even with all the light and the heat, it's not as moldy as it was, but clearly we still have some issues. I do like the bigger ones. They seem to hold up more. They seem to hold more moisture. They're definitely more sturdy. They have a flatter bottom, and they just sit up a lot better than some of the other ones. I'm also an opportunist, and I use whatever I have available. I absolutely love this cup, but the handle's broken, so I can no longer drink coffee out of it. So I figured I would give that a go. And I enjoy the saying on it, so I didn't want to get rid of it. What I probably should do in this case, instead of starting plants that I want to transplant, is maybe put a small house plant in there or grow a pothos in it or something. Okay, so this would be my microgreen area. Again, if you can see, I really enjoy the tape concept. What I did was attempted to make rows. I wasn't overly particular about the rows, but I attempted. And I'm growing some microgreens in here. That way, when they get a little bit bigger, what I will do is just harvest them, and we'll eat them as microgreens or put them in some kind of smoothie or shake or something like that. A lot of what I've started down here too, yeah, I have a lot of peppers, but I also have a lot of brassicas. There are a lot of things in brassicas. Basically what I'm doing are broccoli, more specifically. I actually transplanted the broccoli, I don't know, 4 days ago, maybe. Some of them are not doing so well. They are more cool weather crops, and so I think they might be getting a little too much light. I have never really been overly successful with broccoli, so I did plant a bunch. So those are ones I transplanted. This entire container is all broccoli, and if you can see, there are some sprouts coming up, and I will do another video on how I manage the transplant with these little pods that I'm using. We have some tomatoes coming up. Again, you can see the name came off. Also a tomato. Those are also tomatoes. And that's cinnamon basil. I did not expect that to be up yet, which is fine. Now, I also have some stuff underneath here. So the onions, if you see in the back, not stellar. I had them way too close to the light. What I realized is that they are not fans of being right up against the light. So I put it down on the ground, and while it still looks kind of sad, it's 50% better than what it was a few days ago when I put it down here. I also have a basket here. Let's look. What is this full of? This has thyme in it. Cover it up, help keep the moisture in there. I just planted that, so I'm not expecting any sprouts. Little container, 2 varieties of tomatoes. This is a big pot. I actually have a sweet potato edge right here. I also have a sweet potato upstairs that's rooting and doing really well. Now, of course, when you're doing sweet potatoes, you want slips, and that's what I'm hoping to grow here. If not, it'll just fertilize the soil, and we'll leave it at that. The rest of this container actually has Detroit dark red beets in them. I discovered last year that I really love beets, so beets are also a cool weather crop. So that's kind of why I have it turned this way. Sweet potatoes like the warmth, beets experiment. We're just seeing what's going on here. All right, over here, these have already been transplanted. They were actually planted in February, the same as the eggplant and cucumber, but apparently they were loving life. This is nasturtium. Right here, see if we can get some better light. So actually doing really well, pretty happy. They both look like this. The light over here is a little bit different, and so They do not necessarily look green when we're over under this light. This is actually a tomato that I dug up out of the ground before the end of the season. Actually, I think it was a sucker that I took off of one of the plants, and it's been in the house all winter long. It does not look overly healthy. However, I did just transplant this into a bigger pot, and when I go to put it outside in a few months, couple months, whenever the weather is appropriate, I'll probably bury it up to here. The whole stem will then root. It should get a good trunk on it and produce some great tomatoes. Of course, if not, I'll experiment. That's my thought process, though, that it will. Broccoli. I have broccoli in several different places going around. We also have some pak choi and Brussels sprouts, of course. Labels again, and I'm not 100% sure which one out of that particular group are what. All right, these are seeds I just planted. See, opportunistic, right? I use yogurt containers, whatever container, really. These little pods, again, need to soak up moisture, and they tend to dry out quickly. So keep them in containers where I can keep water in them, and that keeps them moist, and that's what the seeds need in order to germinate. Some seeds germinate when it's cooler. Some seeds need warmth to germinate. So now this actually does not have one of these little pellets in it. This is just straight soil that I mixed together. These are all tomatoes. So we have a couple different kinds, actually. Kellogg's Breakfast here, Japanese Black Trifle, I think. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. Cherokee Purple, which is one of my favorites. This is just like a standard red beefcake. Not beefcake, beefsteak. Roma, one of our favorites too. And these two, again, are beefsteak. We also have several other tomatoes. I already showed you these ones over here. These are these three are a variety that we have not tried yet, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce them without the full word there. Some of them are difficult to pronounce. This tray here actually has a variety of different things. I'm not sure if you can see, but what I did was I just put them in rows of 3, and each row is its own separate plant, seed pod, whatever we want to call it. This is another experiment. I know that's a cucumber of some kind. I am not 100% sure which one it is. And there was another seed on the other side that I've just labeled mystery seed. So we'll see how those come up. And I do have some bell peppers. That whole 10 has bell peppers in it. The lid, this purple tray that these pods are in, actually is a sushi tray. Again, just using something to keep the water. This is actually really sturdy, so I thought it would work really well, and so far it has worked wonders. This container here, I think, is some kind of meat container that we washed out, purchased from the store. And again, experiments, question mark there, not really sure what that is. But 2 of the rows are triple curled parsley, and 2 of the back rows are elderberry seeds. I'm trying to grow some elderberry as well. Okay, so what is it that I use for soil? Well, I actually like to recycle soil, so when I have things in potted plants, which I do sometimes, you know, where I'll pot the plant outside, or when something happens to pass away, as they do occasionally, I still keep the soil, and I'll just recycle the soil. whether it's put it in the garden or when I'm upsizing a potted plant, I just keep the soil. That's what these trays are. These are all trays that have a mix of potting soil from potentially transplanted plants on the inside, some of the plants that were transplanted outside last year, and then also some purchased potting soil. So typically what I do, regardless of the plant, I buy soil that is good for indoor or outdoor. The reason I do that is because most of my plants go outside when it warms up, and then they come back in when it gets too cool for them. I have a lot of house plants as well. So I want some versatile soil. Now there are some specific things that I use as additives in my soil depending on the plant. I like to add bone meal, different like peat moss, sometimes a fertilizer depending on what it is, but it's usually a specific fertilizer, you know, for whatever the plant is, whether it's herbs or vegetables, house plants, roses are sometimes specific. I also like to use sand. Where our garden is, our soil tends to be a little clay filled, so I'll mix sand into the soil that I use, even for in the house, just to make sure that it's well drained. So while these little pods need a lot of water to stay moist, we're looking to get that seed to germinate, so they need to be moist. Once they start getting a little bit bigger, even at this size, we don't want to keep the soil super moist, otherwise we'll start to get root rot and our plant will not grow and be bountiful and beautiful. So when we transplant them, which I will upload a video probably tomorrow of how I transplant them from this point. This tray specifically needs transplanted, as do a couple of these little fellows. I'll show you how we go there, and from there our water habits do change. So I've also started some zucchini over here in these little yogurt containers. They were just planted, so I do not expect them to start popping up, you know, for another week maybe. Okay, so what about lights? All right, so I got that light for Christmas. It's actually just a regular size light bulb. I bought, I don't know what that's called. It's a grip light, a hook light. I bought that, I think at Walmart. It was pretty cheap. Same here, bought that light at the light fixture at Walmart. The light bulb might have been Menards. Cannot remember. I like the one that has the bulb around it. So the light is essentially the same almost on the inside. This one does not have a bulb. This one does. I like that one more. I feel like it makes the light brighter or extends it. I'm not really sure if it does or if it's just the way it's sitting in there. But now these lights are daisy chain lights. I got them off of Amazon, and I can post the link for the lights. I enjoy them. However, in hindsight, I wish I would have invested a little bit more, especially with what I have decided to create down here. I wish I would have invested a little bit more and got some bigger, stronger lights. But these are doing very well. They're great. They actually put off some heat, which is nice. Again, cold basement. And then I have another type of light here, same fixture. I do enjoy this one. Essentially, this area over here is where the larger plants are going because, you know, we got to keep them away. Now, these are, I've rigged them, right? I can clearly move them wherever I would like to move them, you know, up or down, pending my space. However, I just haven't moved them up yet. I want to keep them close. Clearly that tomato is not going to fit under there where some of the other seeds are germinating. I do also have a regular light bulb that's a grow light up here, seemingly pointless because I don't think it's actually hitting anything. I just haven't changed it yet. This is a timer. I bought 2 of them off of Amazon, and I have everything plugged in to this extension cord. I set the timer on 15-hour intervals, and it will come on and turn off all on its own. Now, the only thing that three things I do not have plugged into that would be the heater and this particular light and that light. Those are plugged into another cord that I have down here and not set on a timer. I do have another timer to use, but it only has one plug in it, and I didn't want to plug an extension cord into an extension cord. To me, that just doesn't seem electrically safe. So they just stay on. Not really sure how that electric bill is going to work out, but we will see. Now, one thing you've also noticed is foil all around. That is to promote refraction. I'm not really sure how amazing it is right now. There's clearly some refraction down on the bottom. Some of the foil fell off. White is what I've noticed works the best. That being said, I don't really know how well painting this wall down here white would be, but it's a consideration, just not investing the time in to do that right now. So that is what the dungeon grow room looks like. So it is important that you keep your soil moist, that you have good lighting. And seeds will pretty much germinate without lighting. But if you're looking to grow in the house, you really need some kind of plant light to be able to grow the plant and get it to fruit. Right, because that's the thing that you want it to do. You want it to fruit. You want it to produce. So unless you have a really sunny spot, you're not going to get your plant to produce without appropriate grow lights to do that. And I actually do have one upstairs where my plants have been fruiting a little over the winter time. Some of my plants from the garden last year, I just dug them up, potted them, and brought them in the house. And that's when I actually really started looking into grow lights, purchased one, and we've had a little bit of fruiting from that light. Not a lot, but again, I don't have the light up there set up to produce. I have it just set up really to keep them alive and healthy. All right. Well, I think that's the end of this particular video. I will be back to show you the light that I use to promote fruiting.